Maror didn't know what he was running from, or running to. But there was one thing that he was certain of. He was going to kill that damn Betazoid woman before this jungle adventure was over. She sat on a rock nearby, and to his frustration, she looked exactly as she had the day before, and the day before that. Even though her clothes were ripped and dirty, her face filthy, her hair hanging in stringy ringlets that had lost all their bounce in the moisture of the jungle. Even with her shoes gone, her prospects slim, still she had her composure. Maror sneered at her. "Are you wondering why I haven't killed you yet?" "You hope that I will serve some purpose in the near future." Her calm was infuriating. He walked over to her and yanked her rudely to her feet. "I still can't believe that you survived the crash when others of my men didn't." "I was not tense. I had relaxed myself. Your men were tense. The stiffness resulted in the internal injuries that killed them." "Thank you for your diagnosis." He led her through the jungle, watching carefully all about him for any sign of pursuit. Eventually, the vegetation around them thinned out. Ahead of them was a cleared area, a watering hole. He turned to her. "You first. If it doesn't make you sick, then I'll drink some." She knelt down in front of the water, cupped her hands, and brought it to her lips. She sipped gingerly. "You realize, Maror, that you have nowhere to run to. You're just marking time." "I've never been caught. I take tremendous pride in that. Besides, maybe they'll eventually conclude we fell into one of those, what do you call them? Mud pits." "You sound very confident. A few days ago, I wouldn't have been able to tell otherwise. But from the time I've spent with you, I can tell you're afraid. Terrified of captivity. It's not pride. It's fear of being caught." "That's enough water for you. Move. My turn." "You know, I was just tired of you before, but now I'm really, really sick of you. Your use as a hostage is being outweighed by the fact that I really just want to kill you and get you out of my... What the... Oh!" Deanna, having seized the opportunity to shove him into the water, now turned and ran like hell. As she dashed pell-mell through the jungle, she heard him crashing behind her. She had seized the moment to try and escape because her empathy had convinced her that Maror was quite serious. He was about to kill her. She might not have any future opportunities to escape. She dodged to the right and stumbled on an outstretched root. She fell, and her right hand closed on a small pointed rock. She scrambled to her feet and kept going. A blaster roared behind her, and she could feel the heat. For one insane moment, she envisioned Will Riker coming to her rescue. She had been such an idiot to waste the time that she had with him. Her own fears had held her back, and now she would never have the opportunity to act on the impulses that she had denied. Abruptly, the ground in front of her angled sharply upward. Just as she started to climb up the slope, a hand wrapped around her foot. "Gotcha, you Betazoid bitch!" She tried to get away, but Maror pushed her down to the ground, pressing his blaster against her stomach. "Belly wound. Very slow and painful way to die. It's what you deserve. You've ruined everything. Let her go." Maror looked up, his already pale face going one shade lighter. Riker was standing about 10 feet higher on the slope. He held a phaser aimed squarely at Maror. "No, Federation man, you put your phaser down or I'll kill her. I swear." "All right. Just don't hurt her. Let her go, and I'll take her place." Riker tossed his phaser to one side. At that moment, Deanna jabbed a sharp stone into Maror's hand, drawing blood. He let out a howl. It was all the distraction Riker needed. He leaped and plowed into Maror, pushing Deanna clear. The two men went down, rolling and shoving, each of them trying to get leverage. With a quick twist of his hip, Riker slammed Maror up against a tree with a bone-jarring jolt. Maror lost his grip on the blaster, and Riker made a grab for it. Maror's foot lashed out, kicking the blaster away into the underbrush. And then the Sindarine drove his foot up into Riker's face. Riker went down, rolling, tasting his blood welling up in his mouth. Maror came at him, pulling a knife from his sleeve. Riker, on his feet, barely avoided the slashing attack. The blade sank into the tree trunk. Riker knocked Maror back, and the Sindarine raider came up with the blaster that had been knocked into the brush. Riker dove for cover as the blaster bolt sizzled over his head. Maror dodged to the right to try to get a clear shot at Riker. And Riker saw where Maror was heading. Wait, stop. Don't go there, don't move. Why not, Federation man? Because this will give me the best angle to turn you into a sack of boneless skin. He leaped to his right, and landing with an odd, squishing noise, aimed his blaster directly at Riker. Riker waved his hands wildly. Move, before it's too late. Too late? The one it's too late for is... That was when Maror realized that he was getting shorter. He looked down. He was standing squarely in one of the infamous Jalara jungle mud pits. He looked back up and finished the sentence with slow realization. The one it's too late for is me. Hold on. But Maror had been correct. It was too late. Barely 5 seconds later, before Riker could get to him, Maror had vanished beneath the surface of the mud pit without a trace. And insanely, Maror's final expression had been one of quiet triumph. Deanna insisted that she was all right and unhurt, so Riker contacted Sergeant Tang. The various members of the security crew had split up, the better to cover the vast distances of the jungle. Now Riker informed Tang that Deanna had been recovered, and they were now heading toward the rendezvous point. It would take several days to get there, but Riker was well stocked with provisions, and no abnormal delays were anticipated. As they walked through the jungle, he was really able to appreciate, for the first time, just how beautiful it was. The air was warm, even steamy, and filled with a scented mist. He turned and looked at Deanna, who had been extremely silent for the past half hour. There in the midst of the warm jungle, she was shivering. Her teeth were chattering. Immediately, he knew what was happening. All during the time she'd been in danger, she had managed to keep everything bottled up. But now that she was safe, all that stress was catching up with her. He went to her and put his arms around her. Shh. It's okay. Let it out, Deanna. That's all right. She trembled more violently, staring not at Riker but straight ahead. He stroked her face, making soft, comforting noises, letting her know that it was okay to be frightened, reminding her that she wasn't alone, telling her that he understood. And slowly, ever so slowly, the trembling diminished and eventually stopped. Then she looked up at Riker. He smiled down at her and wondered if she was prepared to move on. Deanna, are you ready? Yes, I am. I finally am. She reached up, wrapped her hand around the back of his head, and drew his face to hers. The kiss was very long and very sweet and filled with promise. Deanna, this isn't right. This isn't the time. You aren't thinking straight. You've been through a lot. She held his face in her hands with her lips mere inches from his. Let me put this to you in a way that I know you'll understand. Shut up and kiss me, Riker. Moments later, all the perfectly logical reasons why this was wrong went out of Riker's mind. Instead, all there was her. The moistness of the jungle combined with the sweat of her. The rustling of trees mixed with the rustling of their clothes, and this time when their nude bodies pressed against each other, there was no intellectualizing, no deep discussion that required anything beyond soft, whispered words, punctuated by occasional gasps. They became each other, filling each other's needs, melding their bodies into one as seamlessly as they had their souls. And somewhere deep within Riker's mind, merged with his spirit, a word echoed. A word that he had never heard before. A word filled with mystery and promise and a future. And the word was Imzadi. They lay next to each other, Deanna's head against his shoulder. He picked out a length of vine that had become tangled in her hair and was about to toss it aside, but she took it from him. "No, I want to keep that as a souvenir. You know, Will, when I'm with you, all my training, my over-intellectualizing, as you put it, just vanishes. I've never felt this way about anyone, and I finally decided to give in to it. I feel the same way. There are no words to... Wait, actually, there was a word. You thought it at me. Imzi, or something?" She propped herself up on one elbow and faced him fully. "Imzadi." "That's it. What does that mean?" "Well, it has several meanings. The surface level is simply beloved or dear one, but when used with certain people under certain circumstances, it has a further nuance. It means the first. The first? Yes. No matter what happens from here on, we will always be true Imzadi. We will be forever each other's first." She looked up at him with those large, dark eyes, and he felt like a total cretin. "You mean you've never had sex with any other man before?" "That's right." "Look, Deanna, I don't know if I said or did anything to give you the impression otherwise, but you're not my first. I've had sex with women before you." "Oh, you've had other women physically. I know that. To be Imzadi is to go far deeper than that. Don't you understand, Will? Other women may have had your body, but I'm the first who's ever touched your soul." And he realized, with a dim astonishment, that she was absolutely right. He smiled. "Imzadi." And she returned the smile and answered him, "I understand." Several days of travel had passed, a day or two longer than such a trip through the jungle would have taken ordinarily. But Deanna and Will kept stopping along the way for exercise. Now, only a few hours out from the rendezvous point, Riker was staring at a piece of paper, an unusual enough material in and of itself, but the Starfleet security belt contained materials for every occasion. The paper was covered with Riker's scribblings, and he looked at it in embarrassment. He was about to toss it away when Deanna, who had returned from her morning ablutions faster than anticipated, snatched it away. She started to read it. "Deanna, I wasn't going to show it to you until it was finished. It's lousy. Shh." She was reading it carefully, every word, and then her voice sounded in his head. "This is beautiful, Imzadi." He thought-cast back to her.
Do you really like it?
For reply, she read it out loud. I hold you close to me, feel the breath of you, and the wonder of you, and remember a time without you, but only as one would remember a bleak and distant nightmare. The future holds such promise, and just as I cannot imagine how I survived the past without you, I cannot imagine a future without you. Oh, Deanna, it's terrible. It's beautiful, and I'm keeping it right here. She folded it up and tucked it in her bodice. They traveled the rest of the way, fingers intertwined, releasing only when they were in sight of the rendezvous point in their waiting lift back to the city. Riker had heard nothing from Deanna since returning her home, so he had gone to the Troy mansion to see her and anticipated a warm welcome. Roxana Troy herself answered the door. She forced a smile but did not step aside to allow him admission. Lieutenant, I have a moral obligation to thank you. You rescued my daughter. I will always be forever in your debt. However, your subsequent actions with my daughter were completely out of line. You took advantage of a very incendiary situation. Riker was doing everything he could not to lose his temper. What happened between Deanna and myself, Mrs. Troy, was entirely our business. I want to see Deanna. And do what, Lieutenant? Try to further dilute her sense of purpose? Lieutenant, Deanna isn't like other women you've known. She has obligations here on Beta Z. Where's the future for the two of you? Are you going to give up your career to remain here, trade in your space legs for walking shoes? And how long before you start blaming Deanna for the decisions you make? Then, in the hallway behind Roxana, he spotted Deanna. She was standing near the bottom of the stairway, a haunted look on her face. She's right, Will. Sooner or later, you're going to leave. Your place is out there. Mine's here. It's never going to get any better for us than it was in the jungle. Let it end on a high note, Will, not in the downward spiral of a relationship gone wrong. And then she ran from him, up the stairs and out of sight. Riker turned and looked at Roxana. I'm sorry, Lieutenant. Believe it or not, I really am. Good day. The door closed in his face. The scotch burned as it went down Riker's throat. He had gotten the hard alcohol from Sergeant Tang, who had seen the young officer's bleak mood and offered the bottle without a word. Riker had taken it to his quarters and had been drinking it steadily ever since. What in hell had he been thinking of anyway? Getting involved with a local girl that way? That kind of thing never led to anything but trouble. And not just involved, no. He'd actually had to go and get feelings for her. The alcohol was nicely fuzzing his brain, though. He was starting to have trouble remembering who he'd had feelings for, and what precisely those feelings had been. The door chimed. Riker, confused, tapped his communicator. Riker here. Riker here, can you hear me?
Will, I want to see you.
Riker spoke into his communicator. Wendy? Sure. Come on over. Wendy walked in. Riker blinked in surprise. Wow. That was fast.
I heard you were upset about something, Will.
Nonsense. Do I sound upset?
No, actually you sound drunk.
He sat on the edge of the bed and stared off into space for a moment. Wendy sat next to him, waiting for him to say something. You know, Wendy, you get in your head this picture of the way that you think things are going to go. And they never match up. Nothing ever turns out the way you think it's going to. This lousy little planet, a whole galaxy of opportunity, and she's got her head buried in the sands of Beta Z, afraid to think about it.
I don't know who you're talking about, Will, but it's sure not me. I want my freedom. Another year or two here, and then I'm gone. Diplomatic corps, or maybe I'll just hitch, do odd jobs. I don't want anything too complicated in life. Nice and simple, hit and run. That's my motto.
There was a pleasant buzz in Riker's head as he stared at the daughter of the Federation ambassador. Has anyone told you how terrific you look?
Not for a long time.
And has anyone done anything about how terrific you look?
Not for an even longer time.
He kissed her, feeling giddy. She was warm and supple against him, undemanding, yielding, wanting nothing more from him than he was capable of giving. He broke from her a moment. What do you think of art?
Boring.
Thank God. And they sank down onto the bed. It was some time later when a startled gasp awakened Riker. He sat up in confusion and saw Deanna standing in the doorway. "My apologies, Lieutenant. I seem to have come at a bad time. Perhaps if I'd called ahead, you might have been able to fit me into your schedule." The noise awakened Wendy, who sat up next to Riker. She saw Deanna, blinked in mild chagrin, and pulled the blanket around herself to cover her nudity. When Riker spoke, his voice sounded thick and slow to himself, and his head was pounding. "Deanna, this isn't what it seems. Okay, it is what it seems, but you said you didn't want to see me anymore. That we were finished, and it had been less than 24 hours since you'd had female companionship, so naturally you got over me. In fact, not only did you get over me, you practically vaulted over me." She spun and walked away. By this time, Riker had pulled on his uniform. He caught up with her halfway down the hallway and spun her around. "Deanna, you said—" "I know what I said. And would you like to know what I said afterward to my mother? That I was wrong to toss you away. That it was time for me to find my own path, and that I wanted that path to be with you. But I foolishly assumed that you wanted me as well. I crawled out on a limb for you, and you chopped it off behind me." "It wasn't like that, Deanna. I wasn't thinking straight, and Wendy showed up, and it was an opportunity, Will? And it really didn't mean anything?" "That's right." "And how do I know, Will, that our time together didn't fall into the same category?" "It didn't. You know it didn't." "Will, I thought we had something special, physical and spiritual. But for me, one hinges on the other. For you, it doesn't. And I don't think that's ever going to change for you. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I can't base my life on maybes." For a moment he bristled. "You sound so damned holier-than-thou. Maybe you'll be the one who changes. Maybe you'll discover that the physical side can have its own rewards, now that you've allowed yourself to experience it." "Perhaps. But there's one thing of which I'm reasonably sure at this point, Will, that you're not going to be there to find out. I'm sorry. I just don't think there's a future for us." She walked away from him, and he said nothing to stop her from going. Then he turned. There was Sergeant Tang leaning against a wall. "You were right to let her go, sir. Mark me. There's a twinkling star for every broken heart that a Starfleet man leaves." "Shut up, Tang." "Shutting up, sir. All part of the service."
The Hood, Riker's next assignment, was finally out of dry dock. It was speeding towards Beta Z on its way to pick up its new first officer, Lieutenant William Riker. Riker knew the ship was on the way. He had taken care of everything, made all the final preparations. Almost. He found himself in the art museum, staring at one particular painting. The one with the large goopy swirls. He looked at it for quite some time. Then slowly, he realized it bore a striking resemblance to stars swimming in sort of a galactic whirlpool. Perhaps it was something like the way the universe looked at the very beginning. Void and miasmic and filled with promise and possibilities. He sensed her standing next to him, but he couldn't turn to face her. "You're leaving, Imzadi. I wish you safe voyage. And I wish you could come with me. For a time, Will, I was ready to change my universe for you. But now I don't think either of us is ready for that." He tried to say that she was wrong, but he couldn't. So instead he tried to find some way to say goodbye, but he couldn't do that either. He turned to her. "Deanna, But she was gone. He took a step in the direction he was sure she had headed, then stopped. He knew this was the way she wanted it. And somehow, somewhere along the way, what she wanted had become more important to him than what he wanted. Ten years had passed. The Enterprise, newly commanded by Captain Jean-Luc Picard, was in orbit around Farpoint Station. Captain's log. Stardate 42372.5. Of the 24 hours Q allotted us to prove ourselves, 11 have now passed without incident, and yet I cannot forget Q's prediction that we will face here some critical test of human worth. There had been a number of strange goings-on there, and Picard had just finished filling in his new second-in-command, Commander William Riker. Now Picard and Riker were heading toward the bridge turbolift on their way to meet with Farpoint's head, Groppler Zorn. As the turbolift door opened, Picard motioned to the person stepping out. "Over here, Counselor. Number 1. I've asked the ship's counselor to join us in this meeting. Counselor, may I introduce our new first officer, Commander William Riker. Mr. Riker, our ship's counselor, Deanna Troi." It had been a decade since their time together on Beta Z, but the old feelings flooded over him with the same sting as if the wound were still fresh. Deanna, for her part, looked utterly serene. Her voice sounded in his head.
"Do you remember what I taught you, Imzadi? Can you still sense my thoughts?"
But out loud she was almost nonchalant. "A pleasure, Commander." "Likewise, Counselor." From Riker's flustered expression, Picard now knew that something was definitely going on. "Have the two of you met before?" We have, sir." "Excellent. I consider it important that my key officers know each other's abilities." Riker wasn't sure, but he thought he could hear Troy's silent laughter echoing in his brain. "We do, sir. We do." They stepped into the turbolift, and his thoughts were whirling. They had parted with so much unsaid. Did she know he cared? Had she been nursing a grudge all these years, not understanding how? And then there was her voice again, in his mind, carrying her thoughts to him like a dove finding its home.
"I, too, would never say goodbye, Imzadi."
Relief flooded over him. He should have known that she would understand and that there was indeed going to be a basis on which to build a relationship. He wasn't sure where that relationship was going to go from there, or what its ultimate fate would be. But at least whatever happened in the future, they would be facing it together. It took them some time to work it out. With all the complications that would come from being lovers again, they had decided simply not to rush things. A shipboard relationship, if it turned sour, could be disastrous. Neither of them was willing to risk everything to stoke the embers of their relationship. They decided to give things time. They did not, however, give their relationship much of anything else. The laws of inertia govern, among most other things, human interaction. As their years together on the Enterprise rolled past, their relationship, since it was at rest, tended to stay at rest. The only force that could have acted on them to change it would have been the idea that they might not be able to alter the course of things any time they felt like it. Then again, why should they have considered that possibility? After all, they thought they had all the time in the universe. And then came the peace conference with the Sindarine. It was night. Riker lay on his back, staring up into the darkness of his quarters, reflecting on how the day had gone. The Sindarine delegation had been brought aboard. A tall, elegant-looking woman named Nitsi, and her aide, Asa, who was smaller, nastier-looking, and seemed to keep staring at Deanna from the corner of his eye. There had been a dinner reception with a level of quiet tension, but everyone had gotten through it without incident. His hands were interlaced behind his head, the pillow soft under him. He had been that way for over an hour as sleep refused to come. Sorting out his feelings for Deanna was rapidly becoming something of a royal pain. Perhaps they'd been kidding themselves. Here he was, someone accustomed to command situations, and she was someone who was always in touch with her feelings. So naturally, they thought they could control their feelings and dictate their relationship, turn their emotions on and off like an old-style light switch. But how realistic was that? He pictured her lying in her quarters, wrapped in Dan's arms. And then, something made him sit bolt upright in bed. Someone was there, hiding in the corner, lurking in the darkness. He started to call out for the lights when a hand clamped over his mouth and shoved him back down onto the bed. Riker struggled fiercely, shoving at the arm that held him down. He reached upward, grabbing at his assailant's face, feeling a bristling beard and skin that was like parchment. And then a voice said, "Lights!" Riker froze, because the voice sounded insanely familiar. The lights came up on command, and now Riker could make out the features of the intruder. The hair and beard were thick and gray. The skin was wrinkled and time-worn, and the eyes burned fiercely with determination, and the face was unmistakable. He was looking up at himself, except he was decades older. "Shut up! We haven't much time. They may be here to try and stop me at any moment, so lie still, listen to me, and be prepared to do exactly what I tell you. Deanna's life hangs on what you do next." Commander Riker stopped struggling, slowly realizing that he was not dreaming. "I'm going to let go of your mouth now. So help me, if you shout or try to get attention, I'll knock you cold and take care of this myself. And if I have to do that and get nailed because I'm easily spotted, then you will quite literally have no one but yourself to blame for the rest of your life." Commander Riker nodded his understanding, and the Admiral slowly raised his hand. The commander was stunned. "Who are you?" "The Easter Bunny. Who in the hell do you think I am? Get dressed. Move! Move! The commander did as instructed, rolling off the bed and pulling on his uniform. You're from the future, aren't you? Smart boy. Now, listen. Deanna's life is in mortal danger. 15 minutes from now, she's going to die. Beverly Crusher won't be able to find a reason for it, but there is a reason. She's been poisoned. Beverly won't be able to detect it because it's a poison that won't even be invented for another 30 years. But I've got the antidote for it right here in this vial. You've got to get to her quarters and get her to drink it. This is insane. You seem to be from the future, but how do I know? You could be an imposter or... Oh, really? This poem bring back memories? The future holds such promise, and just as I cannot imagine how I survived the past without you. Riker stared at his future version in shock. And now full understanding came to him. She died. In your past, my future, she died. And you've come back somehow to try and prevent it. You're tampering with time. And the people you're worried about trying to stop you, maybe scientists or, my God, Starfleet personnel trying to stop you from breaking one of our most important laws. She wasn't supposed to die, I'm certain of it. It was wrong. Wrong for her, me, everyone. I'm here to prevent that wrong. Unless someone stops you. Which means that somebody else isn't as certain as you. Admiral Riker grabbed Will Riker by his uniform front. Despite his age, his strength was almost undiminished and fueled by anger. Damn you, you sanctimonious clod! You want certainty? Here's your certainty. Deanna is going to die. She's going to writhe on the floor and beg you to do something. And all you're going to do is watch her die. And it's not going to be until that moment that you realize she's the better part of you. There was tremendous conflict in Commander Will Riker's eyes. It's wrong. It's wrong to tamper with the past. I can't believe there's any circumstance under which I'd knowingly... You think you can judge me? Remember what we wrote about imagining a future without her? Well, I'm the future without her, buddy boy, and I can tell you right now that it's not something you're going to relish. Her life will end, Riker. You can save it. Here's the vial. You have the power. You're her only hope in hell, and if you don't save her, then hell is where you're going to be. 40 years of hell. Of might-have-beens and what-ifs. For me, there was just the frustration of feeling that I should have done something. But I didn't know what. For you, it's going to be the knowledge that you could have done something but didn't. How much worse for you, Commander. When you call out with your mind, Imzadi, and no one answers. No part of your soul that acknowledges that the word has any meaning to anyone else. What will happen to you then? God damn you, Riker! When your heart's been cut out, how's it going to feel knowing that you're the one who wielded the knife? Will ripped away from him, his face ashen, his heart pounding. Deanna! He charged from his quarters. Riker ran down the hallway and skidded to a halt outside Deanna's quarters. He barged in. Deanna was seated on the bed arguing with her old friend, Dan, the representative from the Lust delegation. When she saw Riker, she rose to her feet, her entire face a question. Riker thrust the vial towards Deanna. Drink this. Quickly. Dan came off the bed and stood between them. Are you crazy? Get out of here! Deanna, you have to drink it.
Your life depends on it.
My life?
Dan blocked Riker, and Will grabbed him by the shoulders and tried to push him to one side. Dan didn't budge. He was a head shorter and considerably slimmer than Riker, but he held his ground. Riker felt like time was slowing to a crawl for him as he twisted in Dan's grasp and flipped the vial onto the bed. Deanna picked it up, confused. Dan spun towards the bed. "Give me that!" With his free hand, he lunged for the vial. Riker spun him around and threw Dan across the room. He crashed into the furniture. "Deanna, if you ever trusted me, if you ever loved me, drink it." Deanna needed no further urging. She pulled at the stopper. It was stuck. With an animalistic roar, Dan sprang towards Deanna. Riker met his charge, and the two of them went down. Riker pounded furiously on Dan's head. It didn't slow him down. Deanna worked desperately at the stopper, kneading it with her fingers. It worked its way upwards. Dan began to transform, his body covered with thick brown hair, his hands shaping into claws. Riker recognized the species immediately. It was a cameloid. Shapeshifters. Incredibly powerful, incredibly dangerous. Deanna started to feel a burning deep inside her. At that moment, the stopper popped off. Dan made one final desperate lunge, but Riker held him back as Deanna drained the contents of the vial in one gulp. The cameloid howled in fury, trying to bat Riker off his back. "You idiot! Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you?" He shoved Riker off and started towards Deanna, hands outstretched. A phaser blast from behind sent the cameloid to his knees. Worf stood in the doorway and fired again. The cameloid wailed in frustration and then fell unconscious. While Worf calmly slung the cameloid over his shoulder, Riker went over to Deanna. "Are you all right?" "I felt something. Some sort of burning in my chest, but now it's gone. Will, what's happened?" "Get dressed. I'll tell the captain that he should meet us at my cabin. You'll understand it all then." "All right. Oh, Commander. Thank you for saving my life." "All part of the service, ma'am." Admiral Will Riker was waiting in young Commander Riker's quarters. Soon he would know the outcome of his younger self's rescue mission, and he thought about the bizarre circumstances that had brought him to this place and this point in time. He had finished his business on Beta Z, and as planned, it had been the Enterprise, commanded by Commodore Data, that had picked him up for his return trip to Starbase 86. It had been on that trip that Data had given him a remarkable piece of news. The scientists on the Forever World had discovered an alternative timeline extending from a focal point in time. The focal point, insanely enough, was Counselor Deanna Troi. In the reality that Admiral Riker knew, Deanna had died on the eve of the Sindarine Peace Conference. But in another reality, Deanna Troi had lived. Data had told him this to try and provide some consolation to the grief that Riker had carried with him for so long. In a parallel time stream, Data had explained, Deanna Troi had not died. He had assumed that Riker would draw some measure of peace from that. Riker had not. Instead, he had drawn a desperate plan. The first step had been to order a new autopsy for the body of Deanna. The new equipment, advanced by 4 decades, had revealed traces of the poison that Dr. Beverly Crusher had been unable to detect. The fact that Deanna had been killed by a poison that was out of its proper time was more than enough to convince Riker that something was wrong. He was certain that someone had gone back in time and killed Deanna.
The killer had known that the advanced poison would escape the detection technology available to Beverly Crusher. And Riker resolved to go back himself, through the Guardian of Forever, and set matters to right. Data had disagreed with the plan. Starfleet regulations were quite specific, and Data could not possibly countenance a plan that would cause a shift in the time stream, even if, as Riker was convinced, it would cause time to be corrected. Data had tried to head him off and stop him. He had been too late, arriving just moments before Riker had overcome resistance from the scientist and leaped into the Guardian. Riker knew that Data wouldn't let matters stand. As long as Data was on the planet's surface, he was protected from whatever changes Riker might cause. So it was only a matter of time before Data sent someone back, or perhaps went back himself, to try and head Riker off. At that moment, the Admiral looked up as the doors to the cabin hissed open. In walked Picard, along with Commander Riker and one other crew member. The Admiral inhaled sharply. "Deanna." "Will?" He approached her, reaching out to her. He brought his hands up to her face, hovered over it for an instant as if afraid to touch her. But then he did. He put his shaking hands to her face. His chest began to heave with pent-up emotion, and the old man started to sob. He no longer cared where he was or who was watching. The ethics of his actions did not weigh on him. All that mattered was that she was there, and she was alive and in his arms, and he thought, "Oh, God. Imzadi. I'm whole again. I never knew. I never knew what I had until you were gone." With an effort, he composed himself and addressed his younger self. "Did you encounter any problems, Commander Riker?" "A slight one. A Cameloid had apparently accosted Dan of the Lust delegation and taken his place. Dan was found unconscious in his cabin a few minutes ago." "A Cameloid, eh? Large? Brown hair and furry? Unless I miss my guess, he's an officer named Blair. If they anticipated my trying to save her, the best way to keep an eye on her was to impersonate someone close to her." "In that case, Admiral, you were taking a chance coming to me. I could have been one of them." "I know. That's why I mentioned the poetry to you, to watch your reaction. It wasn't just to convince you that I'm you. It was also to convince me that you're me." Picard stepped forward. "I hate to break this up, but I, who am unquestionably me, would be most grateful if either of you cared to tell me what in hell is going on. Watch your tone with me, Captain. I have seniority and I outrank you." Quickly, the Admiral outlined the situation for Picard. The Captain took it all in. "All right, Admiral, but you've left things out. How did you come here? In your reality, what happened as a consequence of Deanna's death? You have to tell us so that we can be prepared." The Admiral looked at him for a long, difficult moment. "I can't tell you, Captain. You have to know how difficult this was for me, what a big chance I've taken. If I talk about any events beyond my immediate goal of saving Deanna, then I run the risk of saying the wrong thing. What if I mention that you're alive in my time? Then you can get overconfident and sloppy, and die, and screw things up. Or if I mention that 40 years from now, you're dead. Then every time you run into any sort of danger between now and then, you'll be wondering, is this it? Is this what results in my death? I'm sorry, Jean-Luc. Time is very malleable, and I'm just not going to mold the clay any further." "All right, Admiral. I understand your position, and now you understand mine.
You will stay confined to these quarters. I don't need a random time element gallivanting around my ship. Very well, Captain. I hope you can learn to live with your mistake. And you, Commander Riker.
He slapped his younger self on the chest.
You're an idiot. You're choosing the tidy, easy path with Deanna instead of the more difficult, but ultimately more rewarding path. You aren't even smart enough to know when you have a good thing.
The Admiral made a noise of utter disgust and dropped down into a chair. Picard, Will, and Deanna Troi slowly backed out of the quarters, leaving the sullen Admiral to himself. In the 10 Forward lounge, Picard was discussing the situation with Guinan. The 10 Forward hostess had shown sensitivity to alterations in the space-time continuum before. Data walked into 10 Forward and looked around thoughtfully. Picard caught his attention and gestured for him to come over. Data took a place next to the captain and politely nodded to Guinan. "A question, Captain. Why are Lieutenant Worf and 3 other security guards stationed around Counselor Troy's quarters?" "I will tell you, Data, and I will inform Commander Riker that you have been brought into our little circle of secrecy. But it is to go no further. Now, the official reason is that an unknown assailant, presently in the brig, made an attempt on the Counselor's life. That much is, in fact, true. However, it's quite a bit more involved than that." Data, however, knew precisely how involved it was. For this Data, who tilted his head thoughtfully and listened to the captain's description of his situation, already knew not only what had happened, but more. This Data had stepped through the Guardian of Forever. This Data had waylaid his younger version, who, of course, looked identical, and then deactivated him and left him in his cabin. This Data, no matter how difficult it was going to be for him on a personal level, had resolved that he had only one choice when it came to setting the time stream right. He was going to have to see to it personally that Counselor Deanna Troi died. By the following morning, there had been one change of security guards since the captain had ordered a watch put on Deanna Troi. Worf, however, had remained the entire time. As Riker approached, Worf turned to him with a fierce, protective scowl. "No one has seen or spoken to Counselor Troi, except for a carefully supervised visit by Dr. Crusher." "Excellent, Mr. Worf. Riker to Counselor Troi. Are you awake, Deanna?"
"Yes, Commander. Awake and ready to go."
Moments later, Deanna, Worf, Riker, and the guards were heading down the hallway. They attracted curious glances as others walked past them. Deanna leaned over to Riker. "Do I really require an entire entourage?" "Just until we get to the conference room. Once you're there, you'll be safe, and Worf and the others can return to their duties." In the quarters of Commander Riker, Admiral William Riker crouched in a corner and pulled at the heel of his boot. He kept twisting it until it came clean off. Then he emptied its contents into his palm. Before leaving the Admiral sequestered in the cabin, Commander Riker had removed several weapons from his older self. But there was no way he could have noticed the ultra-miniature phaser that the Admiral had hidden in his boot heel. The Admiral prayed he had done the right thing, holding back information. He knew his job wasn't finished, because if Deanna were out of danger, then the Guardian would have pulled him back to his own time. But that hadn't happened, which meant Deanna still wasn't in the clear. He had to get out. He went to the far wall. He knew that the officer in the adjoining cabin had already gone off to his morning duties, so this was definitely the preferred exit route. He held the phaser close to the wall, set it for a low and quiet setting, and fired. A pencil-thin beam of light emerged from the miniature phaser. The ship's security system did not recognize the futuristic phaser. Instead, it identified the weapon as the closest analog, namely a handheld arc welder. This was hardly a weapon, and therefore no security alert was required. Riker continued his work undisturbed. The two security guards outside Commander Riker's quarters took no notice when the door to the adjoining quarters hissed open. As a result, they never had a chance to react before the phaser beam, now set to stun, cut loose from the miniature weapon in the hand of Admiral Riker. Instantly, they both fell to the ground, unconscious. Admiral Riker grabbed them each by one wrist, backed up, and dragged them into the cabin from which he'd just exited. Inside the cabin, there was a large hole that Riker had cut through with the phaser. He left them lying on the floor. When the Admiral re-emerged from the cabin, he was wearing the uniform of one of the guards. Although there was nothing he could do about his obvious resemblance to the Enterprise's second-in-command, at least he could make himself a bit less noticeable as he moved through the corridors. As he tried to determine his next move, he muttered to himself, "All right, Data, if you are here, where would you be? What would you be up to? Would you really be so cold-hearted as to kill Deanna? And if so, how would you go about it?" At the conference room, the Sindarine ambassadors Nitsi and Asa finally entered. Nitsi bowed slightly to the assemblage. "Our apologies. We were unaware that the switch had been made to this conference room." Asa was staring at Deanna Troi with a most peculiar expression on his face. And Deanna started to feel the first tickle to her mind of something. Something that she was starting to place. The vague feeling that she had encountered once before, when she had been captive, years ago, of a Sindarine raider. In the corridor, Admiral Riker suddenly skidded to a halt. Of course, that's what he'd do. He turned and barreled down the corridor. Minutes later, he was entering Data's quarters. Riker moaned softly. Data was lying unmoving on the bed. It was clear he'd been shut off and tossed there like a sack of wheat. To make matters worse, his head was gone. Riker allotted 60 seconds to locate the head before he went after the future Data himself. It would have been nice to have the strength of the present Data as backup, but he would make do if he had to. He always had in the past, or future, or whatever. The door to the conference room hissed open, and Data stepped in. Picard looked up as the android approached him. "A private matter, Captain, for Counselor Troi." Data proceeded to move over to the counselor and Riker. "I have some rather distressing news. Admiral Riker, your future self, Commander, seems to have suffered some sort of massive heart attack. Dr. Crusher says he's barely stabilized, and he's calling for you, Counselor." I don't feel him in that sort of distress." "He's barely conscious, Counselor. Perhaps that affects your empathic abilities. I took the liberty of coming in person, Commander Riker, rather than using communicators, in the event that unauthorized individuals are somehow tapping into our comm systems." "Good thinking, Mr. Data." "Will, I'd better go to him." "I'll go too." "Are you certain you wish to do that, Commander? Watching yourself die, I'd think it would be difficult for you." "He's right, Will. Please, I don't want to put you through that. Data's with me. I'll be fine. Honestly, if you ask me, I think you're being overly concerned. The danger is probably over. Data nodded in agreement. With 3 seconds to spare in his self-imposed countdown, Admiral Riker found Data's head. It had been wrapped carefully in a sheet and shoved into the back of the closet. He activated it as soon as he pulled it from the cloth. Data blinked and looked around. Then he stared up into the face of his liberator. I assume you are not the person who put me into this predicament. You appear to be Commander Riker, but considerably aged. Come on, Data. We're going. Can you operate your body from here? With a cybernetic impulse from Data's positronic brain, his body lurched off the bed like something from an old horror film. Sir, be careful to face me forward so that I can see where I am going. Riker bolted into the corridor and started down the hallway, Data's head tucked under one arm. Would you care to apprise me, sir, of what is occurring? Riker proceeded to lie through his teeth. I am an older version of your Commander Riker, as you must have surmised. But I'm from another dimension. I'm pursuing Lore, your twin, who killed Deanna in my dimension and now has come here to perform the same murderous act. His motives are a complete mystery to me. Riker knew if he told Data the truth, or even part of it, he might have a bigger problem than when he started. If this Data decided that the future Data's mission was a sound one, then Riker might very well have 2 androids trying to kill Deanna. Data accepted the lie without question. The Admiral realized it made as much sense, if not more sense, than the truth. Commander Will Riker sat down again as Data and Troy walked out of the conference room. He turned to Picard. My future self is very ill. Data says he's calling for Deanna. She's going to him. Picard studied Riker to make sure that his second-in-command was dealing with this news. But Riker's face was inscrutable. In fact, he seemed lost in thought. Deanna Troi looked worriedly at Data as he stepped to one side when they emerged from the conference room. He gestured for her to go first. They started down the hallway. Data studied her long neck, trying to decide what would be the most painless method of disposing of her. For some reason, now that the moment would shortly be at hand, he felt reluctant, but his duty was clear. In the conference room, Riker suddenly jumped as if someone had jammed a rod into his back. Picard looked at him in surprise. Captain, Data said he's calling for her. I know, number one. You told me that... You don't understand, Captain. That's exactly what Data said. He's calling. He's, not he is. And he said it several times. He used contractions. But Data doesn't use... Immediately, both officers were on their feet, but Riker was nearer the exit. The ambassadors were babbling in utter confusion as Riker bolted out the door. He saw them, just turning the corner of the corridor. As if from a separation of years, he shouted after them, Deanna! It's a trap! Deanna spun around as Riker's words and his mind reached out to her and warned her. Data, aware that he had been found out, drew back his fist, and Deanna saw it just as she turned. He stepped forward and drove his fist straight toward her face. With a cry of alarm, Deanna dropped back. Data's fist whistled barely inches from her face and smashed into a wall, going in with such force that it penetrated up to his elbow. Picard came from nowhere, hurtling through the air and grabbing Data from behind. Data lifted Picard completely off his feet and was about to hurl him when Commander Riker plowed into the android, tackling him around the legs. It knocked the android off balance, and he lost his grip on Picard, who tumbled down on top of him. The ambassadors who had come running from the conference room were all shouting at once. Data was turning his attention to Deanna. Riker, indomitable, was grabbing at Data's leg, trying to slow him down. Picard, using the wall for support, was pulling himself to his feet. Everywhere there was confusion, chaos, raw emotions running rampant. And that was when Deanna pointed at the Sindarine delegation.
They've been deceiving us.
Time froze. Then, with amazing calm, Nietzsche spoke.
This is a lie! No, it's not a lie.
Asa looked to Nietzsche.
Shut her up! Make her shut up!
But Deanna continued.
I sense that you want Data to succeed. You did not come here in good faith. I sense duplicity, lies, cheats, anything to stall for time for the Sindarine. You hope to use these peace talks as stalling tactics to forestall your empire's collapse. And once you've received the Federation's help, you'll resume your thieving, warlike ways. This is madness!
But Deanna ignored Nietzsche's protests and instead whirled toward Asa.
And you especially wanted me dead. You'd do anything to see me dead. You tried, didn't you? You tried to kill me. Put something in my drink at the reception. I sense your emotions. Homicidal, murderous. It took me time to punch through the Sindarine resistance. And you tried to get rid of me before I could.
The air around them seemed to be shifting, coming to life somehow. There was a crackling of energy that seemed to come from nowhere. Asa howled.
You empathic bitch, you've ruined everything!
From his sleeve, Asa produced a small phaser, smaller than almost anyone had seen. He had a clear shot at Deanna. He wasn't going to miss. And suddenly, arcing through the air over Deanna's head, was a tumbling golden object. It struck Asa squarely in the chest, knocking him backwards. The phaser shot went wide. The golden object skittered across the floor and rolled up to Deanna's feet. She looked down in astonishment at Data's face.
I suggest, Counselor, that you duck.
Deanna stood there, looking down in confusion. A second later, Data's body slammed into her from behind, knocking her to the floor next to Data's profusely apologizing head. His apologies were drowned out by the phaser beam that crackled over them. It enveloped Asa, staggering him, and he screeched in protest. Admiral William T. Riker advanced on him, slowly, inexorably, the power blasting from his phaser. You're from my time, aren't you? That's the only place you could have gotten that weapon. You're from the time stream that had been, and will be again. A time stream in which the Sindarine's duplicity was revealed by Deanna, and their peace initiative turned down. It was the downfall of your race. So you decided to come back and change your race's history to your liking. Kill the woman who blew the whistle on them. And in one reality, you got away with it. But not in my reality, you murderer. Not in mine. Because you picked the wrong focal point. Around them, the scream of the phaser merged with the howling of the air, and Asa was knocked completely off his feet. He sagged to the floor, unconscious and helpless. And then the air around them was roaring with far-off winds that seemed to call from another time and place, from an infinity of maybes. A coruscating, sparkling whirlpool of color and light. Asa started to dematerialize, his very molecules being drawn into the vortex around them. Commander Riker lost his grip on Data, who was also starting to fade. Deanna whirled to face the Admiral. He, too, was being drawn off. The color seemed to be fading from him. He reached out to her.
Deanna!
Heedless of the danger to herself, Deanna Troi stretched out her hand to the man who had crossed decades, remodeled the universe, all for her. Her hand passed right through him as if he were a ghost, the ghost of things yet to come. She cried out to him, "I'm sorry. I tried to touch you one last time." He smiled, his body disappearing like the Cheshire Cat's. His voice sounded distant.
Don't be sorry, Deanna. Maybe it won't be the last time. Besides, who really cares about all this physical touching? Not young Deanna Troi. It's the spiritual that's important. That's forever.
And then, with a final roar and burst of wind that swept over everyone in the corridor, he was gone. Commander Riker entered Deanna's quarters, his hands behind his back. "Are you okay, Deanna?" She shut off the computer screen she was studying and folded her hands. "Why shouldn't I be okay?" "Well, you went through a lot yesterday." "We both did. But that was 24 hours ago. I bounced back quickly, given time." He walked slowly toward her. "I thought you'd be interested. The Cameloid disappeared about the same time as the others. Oh, and the Sindarine ambassador has been sent packing. The peace initiative has fallen apart, and the experts predict that it's just a matter of time now before the entire Sindarine civilization collapses, which is apparently what was supposed to happen the first time. And Data has his head together, so to speak. Apparently I, the Admiral that is, told Data that this other Data, the one trying to kill you, was actually Lore. And was it?" Riker paused and thought about it. "I don't know. I know Data believes it to be. I think he's far more satisfied with the notion that it was Lore than he would be with the concept that there would be a circumstance in which he'd try to murder you. Of course, we have no idea what influences will shape Data over the next 40 years. He might very well decide that, given the life of one woman versus the reality that he knows, the woman is dispensable, even if that woman is you. That's a hell of a thing for him to have to live with. So maybe it would be better if..." Deanna finished the thought for him. "If we kept it between ourselves? Consider it kept. So, did you come here to discuss everything except what you really want to discuss? Namely, us?" Riker let out a slow breath. She waited for him to speak. "Deanna, I don't know what's going to happen with us. I saw what I developed into without you. Can't say I liked it. But that was when you had been pulled from my life prematurely and completely. We could continue in the way that we are now, and as long as you're there to be friend, confidant, soulmate, things could work out well for both of us. I see what you're saying. Of course, on the other hand, if we become, or go back to, being lovers, things could work out even better for us. Or worse." He shook his head. "I feel so ridiculous. Do we really have to wait 40 years until we're ready to take a chance on the two of us? No, Will. We just have to wait until we're ready. It might take 40 years, or who knows? It might take 40 days. We have to wait and see. But at least we have a chance. It's up to us how we use it." "That's true. Oh, by the way, Deanna, I made something for you. It's only an approximation, of course, based on my memories which were filled at the time with the sight of a particularly nubile young maid of honor and her lovely figure. He brought his hand from behind his back. In it was a thin, white gauze headband. That's like the one Chandra wore. Ah, so I did make it close enough so that it's recognizable. Deanna, if you wouldn't mind turning your head. She angled her head around, and he looped it around and back, pulling her hair through. She stood and presented herself for inspection. How does it look? As beautiful as the woman wearing it. She felt her emotions turning to melted butter, and she went to him. He enveloped her in his arms, and their lips came together. And for a long moment, all the confusion and complexity of their lives fell away. And they were once again the young man and woman hungering for each other. The couple shyly learning about one another and exploring the things that each of them lacked and each of them provided. The new lovers in the jungle, intoxicated with their environment and each other. She was the woman whose life he'd saved, and he was the man whose life she had made. And they had all the time in the universe. Mary Mack watched in astonishment as 4 people emerged from the swirling vortex of the Guardian of Forever. Admiral Riker, Commodore Data, Lieutenant Blair, and one more form that tumbled forward, clearly unconscious. She went to them and rolled the body over to get a better look and confirm what she thought.
This is Marlock, the scientist I told you about, the one who vanished. We just thought he left the planet.
Riker prodded Marlock's unconscious body with his toe.
Oh, he left all right, but he left through the Guardian. Single-handedly, he created a universe in which his people's plan succeeded, and they grew once more into a strong, marauding race, but not anymore.
And then the Guardian spoke.
All is as it was.
Data turned to face the Guardian. You mean that Admiral Riker did indeed restore the timeline to its original form? That his actions were, in fact, correct?
All is as it was.
And now Blair stepped forward, his long fur swirling.
For crying out loud! If you knew that time had been tampered with in the first place and that the Admiral was doing the right thing, why in hell didn't you tell us that?
You did not ask.
There was a long silence, except for the winds howling. Blair took a step closer to the Guardian.
We didn't ask.
Riker started to laugh.
We didn't ask? You mean everything we went through? All the difficult decisions we had to make? We didn't ask?
Data stood in quiet amazement. It's true. We didn't. How very foolish of me. In my determination to uphold the Starfleet imperative of non-interference in time, I overlooked the obvious.
You forgot, Mr. Data. The first duty of Starfleet, which I thought about while I was with Captain Crusher. The duty that supersedes all imperatives and directives. That we must always seek the truth.
Moments later, Mary Mack had enlisted Blair's aid in dragging the unconscious Marlock away. Data and Riker stood before the Guardian. I want you to understand, Admiral, that I am truly sorry for my actions.
That's all right, Data. On the face of it, what you did, or tried to do, was correct.
It's curious, Admiral. In my efforts to kill Deanna Troi, I made several clumsy mistakes. I did not intend to, but I did.
Perhaps you did intend to, Data. Perhaps you wanted to be stopped. One of the key things about being human is that you don't always know why you do the things you do. The important thing is that it's all worked out for the best.
Has it, Admiral? Consider, while we are on this planet, we are untouched by whatever changes might have been made by our reparations. When Marlock altered time, we, and our memories, simply altered with it. Now, however, we are at the center of the change. When we leave this world, there is no certainty as to what will happen to us. Our memories may shift to accommodate the new time stream, or we may retain our memories, but be in a strange, new environment. There is even a remote possibility that we may blink out of existence if we do not exist as entities in this time stream.
I don't think that's going to happen, Data. And you know why? Because I think that this thing, the Guardian, is God's window on the universe. And I don't think God would have let us in through his window if he didn't intend for us to live in his house.
That's very spiritual, Admiral.
I didn't used to be spiritual, but I had a good teacher. I don't know what else there is to say, Data, except...
Data put up a hand, momentarily silencing Riker, and paused to get the correct inflection of his next words.
Let's get the hell out of here.
Riker nodded.
I think that probably covers it.
Riker gazed up at the swirling skies, the vast colored streaks and miasma of temporal rifts that formed the heavens above the forever world. And he realized that in the sky's swirling and whirlpool shape, he saw a painting he'd seen a lifetime ago. There were reds and purples, and then in the midst of this vast mixture of cosmic existence, he saw an image. We're going to face a new and different universe, Admiral. Are you not at all afraid?
No, Data. I'm not afraid at all. I think it's going to work out just fine.
And he called out, as he had called out in hopelessness and despair, for year upon year of desolation. And the answer came. Whether it was from within him, or whether it came from somewhere out there in the galaxy, from someone who was the better part of all that he was, he couldn't be sure. But it was there just the same. Tears came to his eyes as he heard in his head the words that he'd waited half a lifetime to hear. Sweet and musical, in a voice filled with promise.
Welcome home, Imzadi.
Imzadi was written and adapted for audio by Peter David and read by Jonathan Frakes. The recording engineer was Paul Fowley. Post-production and sound design by Gary Fink. Original music was composed by Richard Emmett, Sam McCallie, and Carl Schurtz. Theme music from the Star Trek television series was composed by Alexander Courage and Gene Roddenberry and used courtesy of Bruin Music. The associate producer was Linda Woolman. Imzadi was produced and directed by Susan Perrin.